2021 Kia Telluride shaking and pulsating and the whole car starting to shake, especially when braking at high speeds going downhill. Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and rotors on a 2021 Kia Telluride. Now, most likely we've got an issue with warped rotors, and that's what we're going to do today. It also may be an issue with the wheels, maybe not being balanced fully. So I'm recommending that they get some new tires on here. They look like they're pretty worn down as well, but we're going to go ahead and do a full brake job, front brake pads and rotors. Now, the first thing I like to do is push the caliper pistons back in so that we'll have more room in here for the thicker pad material and of course the thicker rotors as well. Now, I like to use the method where you put a screwdriver in here and just pry that towards you. But before I do that, it's a good idea to pop the hood and make sure that you have enough room in your master cylinder so you're not going to overflow that fluid when you push it back through. So let's pop the hood and go take a look. So here's our brake master cylinder, and you can see that we are pretty close to the max. It looks like maybe somebody has been topping off the fluid as the brakes have been wearing down. I still think we have enough room in here so that we can push the caliper pistons back in without this overflowing. If you do need to remove some brake fluid, you can use like a turkey baster or a little syringe to suck out some of that fluid. A lot of people ask me if you need to remove this cap when pushing the brake caliper piston back in, and you really don't. I really don't notice a difference in the resistance when taking that off or leaving it on. And really, the less you can expose the brake fluid to moisture, the better, because brake fluid will absorb moisture, even moisture in the air. It's hygroscopic, and that causes it to degrade and go bad. But it looks like we're good enough. We can push those caliper pistons back in and keep moving. All right, so we do have enough room. Now we can pry those back in. That's easy enough to do with either a flathead screwdriver or you can use a small pry bar. And really what we're trying to do is just wedge in here in these little openings in the rotor. If we can just catch the edge of the pad. Now what you can also do, see we're already moving that a little bit, is you can put this in right in between. Let me see if I can show you. You see this little opening right there? Now I can wedge my screwdriver in between the inside pad and the rotor and pry that in, and that will allow us to push those pistons the rest of the way in. So let's go ahead and do that. If you've got two screwdrivers or pry bars, that works great. Also, you can see we have the wheel turned out to the left. That just makes it a little bit easier to get to these bolts to take off the caliper. All right, now we can loosen and remove these two 14mm caliper slide pin bolts. I'm just gonna use a little impact here. Take those out and set those aside. Now we can take off the caliper, and you can see I've got these little caliper hooks. These come in really handy. You can just put that through the edge of the caliper and hang that up out of the way, up on the coil spring. Now we need to loosen and remove the two caliper bracket bolts, and those are a 17mm. It's a good idea to have one hand on this caliper bracket so it doesn't drop to the floor when you do this. There we go. We can pull these bolts out. You'll notice these do have a washer with them as well. All right, now in order to take off the rotor, you'll notice that we have these two screws that hold the rotor on. Those can be a pain sometimes. Honda and Acura are also notorious for using these little screws that hold the rotor on. A lot of people will end up stripping these and drilling them, and it's a big hassle or a big pain. I recommend you pick up one of these. This is an impact screwdriver, and this is JIS3. That's the Japanese industry standard, and it looks like it fits in there just fine. The idea behind this screwdriver is you just strike the end here. While you're holding it, it'll actually twist it counterclockwise. So let's give it a try. That worked. Try the other one here. Got it. No problem at all. On some vehicles, the rotor will just come right off, and sometimes they're stuck on there pretty good. On this one, we don't have the threaded holes in the rotor to be able to push this off like a press off of the hub. Let's just give it a whack here with the Tanya Harding and see if we can break that loose. There we go. All right, before we put the new rotor on, I'm gonna clean the hub of all this corrosion and rust. That's what caused that rotor. You can see that it was stuck here on the shoulder of this hub. So that's where we're gonna clean that off. We're just gonna use a little wire wheel here on a drill. If you're gonna do something like this, make sure you wear some eye protection. Now, in order to prevent that new rotor from sticking, I'm gonna brush this with some Permatex anti-seize. A little bit goes a long way with this stuff, but we just want to coat the face of this hub. Mostly though, I'm concerned about this center or the shoulder of that hub where the old rotor stuck. That should do it. Now I've got the new rotor here, but before we put it on, we need to wipe off all the oil and residue. They ship these or pack these in oil to prevent them from rusting. So we're just gonna hit that with some brake cleaner before we put it on. All right, and then when we put the new rotor on, just take note here to the tapered holes, and those are gonna line up with the threaded holes on the hub. Now, a lot of people say that these little screws are used only for manufacturing as the vehicle goes down the assembly line. I don't really have an opinion on it. I just usually put them back in, especially if they came out okay, which these ones did. Just make them snug if you're gonna reuse them. If you're not, that's up to you, that's fine. You know, the lug nuts will hold the new rotor on, but I usually just put them back the way that they were. All right, now what we need to do is get this caliper bracket cleaned up and ready to go back on. And first of all, we're just gonna pull out the old pads. We'll just pull them to the center. It's a little bit easier to take them off on this. Now, these of course are not totally worn down or anything. They've still got some pretty good meat on the pad, but because the owner is experiencing some pretty severe pulsating, we're changing the rotor and putting out some new pads for them. So we can also change out this hardware here, these abutment clips. They'll just come right off like that. And what we want to do is also clean up this bracket. You can see in these little channels right here, a little bit of rust is starting to build up. We don't want rust in here or any buildup because that'll push up on those clips and that can cause the pads to seize or bind. They won't be able to retract. So we're going to make sure that those are nice and clean. Here I'm going to use a wire wheel again. Just make sure you wear some safety glasses on this as well. All right, those are nice and clean, but I'm also going to take out and clean and re-grease these slide pins. So really, if you just pull back a little bit on the rubber boot, you should be able to pull those right out. And we're just gonna wipe these off, get them all clean. Sometimes I'll put them back in and pull them back out to try to get even more of that old grease out of there. These ones are still pretty good shape. Then we're gonna put on some new grease, and I'm gonna use this caliper grease. This is the Versachem synthetic. This stuff's really good for slide pins. Just a nice little coat here on the slide pin is great. And then pull that in, let that boot just pop right back up. Now you see how it pushes out a little bit? What we have is a little bit of trapped air in there. So what you do is pull back and squeeze the bushing. You see now it stays because we got all of the air out of there. That looks good. Now let's do the other one. Now you'll notice this one also has a rubber bushing on the end. That's part of the reason that I do these one at a time, just to make sure that I don't mix that up. But here we're gonna put it in there again, get out any more grease that we can. There really wasn't much grease in this one, but you wanna make sure to use the correct grease here, because if you use petroleum-based grease, it will cause these to bind and stick, and it'll even cause this rubber to swell. That can cause your brakes to bind and drag, and you just don't want that. So should be good to go. Pop that back in. Same thing, just make sure that we squeeze that and get all the air out. Now I'm gonna also use this same grease here as a little bit of a coating here where the abutment clips go in these little channels. Now this is more of a protectant rather than a lubricant. That will hopefully prevent that from corroding or rusting. All right, and then we've got the new clips here that our kit came with. It's recommended to replace these every time. Every once in a while I'll order a brake kit online or pick it up at a parts store and it won't have the hardware. So you'll have to really clean up the old hardware and reuse it, but I really don't like to. It's a lot easier if you can just get new ones and just snap these in. Make sure that you press them in all the way and that they sit in there flush so that you don't have any binding or anything like that. But that looks good. This is now ready to mount up on the car. Now before I put the caliper bracket on, I'm going to put a little bit of this blue thread locker, the medium strength thread locker on the caliper bracket bolts. I really like to do that. It seems to help hold them in place, and a lot of manufacturers do recommend that. All right, and then we can mount the caliper bracket. Just hold that up in place while we get these caliper bracket bolts started. Just get those snug for now. Okay, we'll have to cut that out. All right, now the torque specs that I found online for this bracket was a range between 72 and 86. The owner was out here watching me do the other side, and I asked him, pick a number in between there, and he said, let's go with 80. So we're gonna torque these caliper bracket bolts to 80 foot-pounds. All right, now we can put the brake pads in, and what we wanna do is match them up to the ones that we took out. So the ones that we took out had the little noisemaker on the inside at the top, so we're gonna put that in the same exact place. So let's just line that up. What the heck is that noise? Okay, so that clip wasn't all the way down. There we go. There we go. This clip wasn't all the way down, or I might have knocked it out, but that's in now. Good to go. Same with the outside pad here. Let's just go ahead and get that lined up and press it in place. That looks good. I like to put a little thin coat of this silicone ceramic extreme on the outside of the pad, basically where the caliper is going to make contact with the pads. This stuff here just seems to quiet everything down and Makes a little bit less noise. All right, now we can grab the caliper down from this hanger up here. This is where we have it hanging on the coil spring, and just take that hanger off. It's very important that you don't twist this brake line when you're doing this. Carefully put this over the pads, and that should just slide right on since we have the caliper pistons pushed all the way back in. And then we can put in the caliper slide pin bolts. Now you'll notice here the slide pin also has a hex shape, so you can put an open end wrench on here and hold this steady while you tighten it if it wants to spin. Let's go ahead and try and tighten it and see if it does spin. Nope, that one didn't spin. Let's see if this one does. Nope, no problem at all. If it does spin, as you're tightening it, just keep in mind you can just throw an open end wrench on that. I don't know what size that is, probably a 17. For the torque specs on these, the caliper slide pin bolts, what I found online was a range of 27 to 30 foot-pounds. Again, the owner was with me as I did the other side, and I asked him, which number do you want me to go with? And he said 28. So we're gonna go ahead and torque these to 28 foot-pounds. And you're done. Now, it's very important before you drive off, you need to step on the brake pedal several times to push the caliper pistons back out, which will press those pads firm up against the rotor where they need to be. When you do this, however, don't press the pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. Just pump it about halfway several times until it feels firm. And don't forget to double check the fluid level in your master cylinder, and you should be good to go. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description to some of the parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.